1 second, Jacksonites. Who else? Okay. Oh, I forgot one thing. 1 second. One more second. Let's see, where's it at? Let's dark man. Put that away. I'll hope. Yep. Get in there. There it goes. Here we go. Okay. Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome, yes, to... Ooh, I gotta see that later. Sorry. To the first installment to my Godzilla franchise re-review. Yes, indeed. Hang on. Okay. Oh, yeah. First installment to my Godzilla franchise re-review. I am very nervous to delve back into this franchise, but I'm also very excited to get back into it because, well, I always felt that my original videos were always either rushed or, yeah, they were rushed. I didn't like the way I was making videos back then. And I always said to myself, even then, as I was having fun doing it, if I can upgrade my system, I'm definitely re-reviewing this franchise. And I've finally gotten to that point. So today I will, of course, yes, be starting with the original 1954 classic that started it all. Gojira from 1954, directed by Ishiro Honda. Produced by Tomiyuki Tanaka, with the screenplay written by Takeo Murata and also Ishiro Honda. Oh, Omega Pictures here. Starring Akira Takarada, Momoko Kochi, Akihiko Hirata, and Takashi Shimura. Music by Akira Fukube. Cinematography by Masamo Tamai. And of course, distributed by Toho. Released November 3rd, 1954 in Japan. And what can I really say about this movie's production, about the film itself, that really hasn't been said already. But I will be, of course, going through the plot and going through the pros and cons, which sort of have differed, but not really. They just kind of, the way that I'll state them will have differed from my original review. So without further ado, let's get into the plot, shall we? When the Japanese freighter ship Eiko Maru is destroyed near Odo Island, which is a small island in the Pacific Ocean, another ship is sent to investigate called the Bingo Maru, only to unfortunately meet the same fate as the first ship with a few survivors. This ship being destroyed by a blinding flash of light and a giant ball of fire, seemingly. A fishing boat from Odo is also destroyed, with one survivor making his way, being able to make his way to the shores of Odo Island. Fishing catches drop down to zero out of nowhere, and an elder on Odo Island blames an ancient sea creature known as Godzilla, of course. Reporters arrive on Odo Island soon afterwards to further investigate, and a villager tells one of these reporters that there's something big going crazy under the ocean, and that's ruining the fishing business. For those who don't know, fishing and seafood is a huge part of the Japanese diet, and also basically it's one of the biggest businesses in the Japanese economy still to this day, because you just have this giant repertoire of food that at their disposal at their disposal. So it does make sense that fishing would be such a big part of their business. That evening, a ritual dance is executed to try to appease Godzilla is held, during which the main reporter of the team learns that these locals used to sacrifice young girls on a raft in the middle of the ocean to this monster. And then that night, a giant typhoon strikes the island, which destroys the reporter's helicopter. And Godzilla, though very, very, very briefly seen, kills 20 of the villagers' livestock, apparently, and also in the process kills 9 people. Odo residents travel to Tokyo and they start demanding disaster relief. And the villagers and reporters' evidence describes damage consistent with something large that had trampled through the village, crushing it. The government finds paleontologist Kyohei Yamane, played by Takashi Shimura, who was a very big actor at the time, and was actually kind of odd to see such a big A-grade actor in what at the time was just seen as a cheesy B-movie. Takashi Shimura had just come off of playing his role in Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai, which was released not long before Gojira was released. It was also distributed by Toho. Yamane leads this investigation to the island, where giant radioactive footprints are discovered, as well as a trilobite. Trilobite is a ancient arthropod type creature that roamed the seas millions and millions of years ago. But though they have since become extinct. Long time ago they became extinct. And then suddenly a village alarm bell is rung throughout the village, and Yamane and some others rush up a hill to try to get a glimpse of the monster, and then they retreat when they see Godzilla's full frame, being a giant dinosaur essentially, with the body of a T-Rex, the sort of posture of an iguanodon, and the spines of a stegosaurus, which then roars, scaring the living shit out of most of the villagers, and then returns to the ocean. Yamane then presents his findings in Tokyo, and he then estimates that Godzilla is around 50 meters in height, which is 164 feet. This is the confirmed actual height for Showa-era Godzilla, including this one and the raids again to Terra Mecha Godzilla. Godzilla is 50 meters in height, and evolved from a type of ancient sea creature, then becoming a terrestrial animal. And he then concludes that Godzilla was disturbed from its underwater habitat by an underwater hydrogen bomb testing. The film doesn't specifically point fingers on who was conducting these tests. However, if you know your history, you kind of know that we kind of know that America, not really kind of, but we know that America was conducting these gigantic H-bomb tests around the Japan area. So I think it's at least implied that America is at least somewhat to blame for awakening Godzilla. Though we don't get his for sure origin until Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. But thank God that movie is so far away from me. Debate ensues about notifying the public about the danger of Godzilla. Some want it to be known, but others want it to just be kept a secret for now in order to avoid a national panic, which does make sense. And honestly, if it was up to me, I would say let's keep it quiet for now. And meanwhile, while all this debate is going on, 17 ships in total are lost at sea to Godzilla. 10 frigates are dispatched out in the middle of the ocean to try to kill Godzilla using depth charges, which are it's an anti-submarine warfare weapon essentially. These big giant mini H-bomb looking things. Um, which are powerful enough to destroy submarines. So it's a fair assumption to think that depth charges would at least hurt Godzilla, which of course they don't. But the mission disappoints Yamane, who wants to leave Godzilla alive so he can be studied. Uh, Typical or sort of typical, like, scientist wants to keep the monster alive. I mean, you see this type of thing in like the Thing from Another World, for example, who wants to keep the thing alive in order so they can study the creature and try to learn from it. Though honestly, as much as I hate to say it, I love Godzilla, but if in real life, I would say, yeah, we got to kill him because I don't know. I'm not going to get into that subject. Godzilla, of course, survives the death charge and appears offshore. And officials appeal to Yamane for some ideas to try to kill him, but Yamane tells the authorities that Godzilla is essentially unkillable, having survived H-bomb testing, which is no mean feat. He then further insists that he must be studied. Yamane's daughter, Emiko, played by Momoko Kochi, has finally decided to break off the arranged engagement to Dr. Yamane's colleague, Daisuke Serizawa, who was a Japanese war vet, played by Akihiko Hirata, who is one of my favorite Toho actors, because of her current because of her current love for Hideto Ogata, played by a very, very young Akira Takarada. I think this was both. I don't think it was their first, but it was their first big film. Ogata being a salvage ship captain. And then a reporter arrives and asks to have a small interview with Dr. Serizawa, and Emiko escorts this guy to Serizawa's lab. And after Serizawa refuses to give up his current work to the reporter, he gives Emiko a small demonstration of a project that he's been working on, and he makes Emiko swear that she must keep it a secret from everyone else. And this demonstration horrifies her, the engagement. And then shortly after she returns home, the sound of Godzilla's mighty footsteps approaching is heard throughout the neighborhood. And then Godzilla surfaces in Tokyo Bay, and then enters the city, attacking Shinagawa and scattering residents from his path all over the place. A passing train collides with Godzilla's foot, who then destroys the train in a pretty famous image of Godzilla having a car from the train in his mouth. And then after further destruction, specifically a Japanese bridge, Godzilla then returns to the ocean. And after consulting with international experts, the JSDF Defense Force constructs a 30-meter tall, which is 98 feet, 50,000 volt electrified fence, which in Godzilla King of the Monsters it was 300,000 volts, which is actually a small change in King of the Monsters I actually do like over the original Japanese. And deploys forces to stop and kill Godzilla. And this does take a matter of weeks, which is a big flaw in King of the Monsters, because there it comes off as Japan just put up this giant fence in the snap of a finger, which is impossible. Let's see, where was I? Yamane then proceeds to once again return home, pissed off that there is no plan to study Godzilla for his resistance to radiation exposure, where Emiko and Ogata await, hoping to get his permission for them to wed. It's a big part of the film's allegory that I'm not sure if that I will be getting into. But then Ogata disagrees with Yamane, arguing the threat Godzilla poses far outweighs the potential benefits from studying his body. And then Yamane gets pissed off and tells him to leave. I honestly don't really blame Ogata for saying what he says, because he's not really wrong. Neither one of these characters are in the right, but they're also not in the wrong either. Though I do think that Ogata is more on the logic side, in my opinion. Ironic, because he's not a scientist. Then Godzilla resurfaces and breaks through the fence to Tokyo, the first time in cinema history, unleashing his atomic breath, melting down the high tension wires like it was nothing, and unleashing more radiation upon Tokyo in one of the most iconic scenes in all of cinema, where he goes on his big giant fucking rampage throughout Tokyo. Further attempts to kill Godzilla with tanks and jet fighters, or fighter jets, and after a very, very, very long rampage, I think it's almost 15 minutes long, Godzilla then disappears into the ocean. The Wako Clock Tower is destroyed, the Diet Building is destroyed, the Kachidoki Bridge, the Mijigeki Theater, almost you name it in Tokyo at the time is destroyed. There is a massive, massive, massive loss of human life. And of course, the day after, hospitals and makeshift hospital shelters are absolutely overflowing with the dead and the dying. And a large population, or a large portion of the surviving population, now has radiation sickness. Distraught by the rampant death, disease, and destruction, 3Ds, Emiko tells Ogata about Serizawa's research, telling him that Serizawa had created a compound which he dubbed the Oxygen Destroyer, which is a compound that disintegrates oxygen atoms, and the organisms die of rotting asphyxiation. Their bodies are essentially stripped of oxygen and then liquefied and then dissolved, leaving nothing but the skeleton, and eventually even the skeleton is also disintegrated as well. Emiko and Ogata go to Serizawa to try to convince him to use the Oxygen Destroyer, but at first, after trying to hide his work and knocking the shit out of Ogawa, he initially refuses, saying that he doesn't want the public military to get their hands on the Oxygen Destroyer, because he doesn't want another big giant arms race. He doesn't want to be responsible for rampant near genocide, which I actually really don't blame him. Because if I was in his position, I think I would want to do the same thing. I'd want to look, what I've created, it can be used as a weapon, and I don't want to be responsible for that. I don't want to be responsible for another arms race. This potentially being the deadliest arms race in the existence of man-made weapons. So yeah, I think I can understand Dr. Serizawa's moral dilemma that he has to face here. He's created such a massive weapon, and here's something that could potentially be killed by this weapon, but there's the conflict of, do I use it or do I just remain in silence? I ultimately think he decides to not remain in silence for a couple of reasons. One is that after watching a program displaying the nation's current tragedy of a giant big choir of singing girls singing a song called Prayer for Peace, this convinces him. But I also feel like if he was saying, should I just remain in the shadows, that's the coward's way out. Though I do think that his sacrifice, in my opinion, could have been avoided, but I'll get to that in just a minute. Serizawa finally gives into Ogata and Emiko's pleas. Yeah, exactly. Omega picture. Anyway, so he gives into Emiko and Ogata's pleas, stating that, okay, fine, this will be the one and only time the Oxygen Destroyer will ever be used. And a Navy ship takes Ogata and Serizawa to plant the device in Tokyo Bay. After finding Godzilla, Serizawa then unleashes the oxygen destroyer upon Godzilla and cuts off his air support and also his tow line, deciding to honorably commit suicide in order to prevent his secret of creating the oxygen destroyer from truly getting out. And before he had gotten to the ship, there was a scene where he was burning all of his research papers, destroying all evidence of the oxygen destroyer. The mission proves to be a success, and Godzilla is killed by the oxygen destroyer. However, many do mourn the death of Serizawa. And Yamane reveals it is his belief that if nuclear weapons are continuing to be around, another Godzilla may yet rise in the future. Which is kind of what happens, and it's a very, very non-optimistic ending. It kind of makes you just feel, God, humanity kind of sucks. So how about this plot? Well, as I stated in my original review, it is very similar to The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. In fact, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, along with the original King Kong, were the main inspirations for the four triumvirate of creators of Godzilla to create Godzilla. And those four co-creators being, of course, Ishiro Honda, Tomiki Tanaka, Eiji Tsuburaya. Yes, I know Yamane comes back and reigns again, and Akira Ifukube. And I said this before, too. I definitely do think Akira Ifukube had the least amount of involvement with creating Godzilla. However, his involvement is still significant nonetheless. What can I really say about the film that hasn't been said 100 billion times already? There's so many reviews for the original Gojira out there nowadays. It's not even funny. I just kind of feel like mine would blend into the crowd. Though certainly future Godzilla reviews that I will do will not blend into the crowd because they'll miserably go against the status quo. But this one, I really can't go against the status quo because this is a very, 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 very solid, well-made, well-put together, and very good movie. Though I will say this, it's not one of my favorite Godzilla movies. It's not one of my favorite kaiju films. Yeah, I knew that. Yeah, it's not one of my favorite kaiju movies. And for me, I kind of had to be in a certain mood to watch the original Gojira, but I really cannot deny this is a very good film. It's a very enjoyable film. And I definitely would put it amongst the best Godzilla movies in existence, potentially the best in some ways. So let's get into the pros and cons of the original Gojira. They're pretty much the same, although I do have a couple of nitpicks that I will get into when I get to the cons. Pros is that the characters in this film are good. They're very, very, very good. They're very well written, well acted. They're sort of integral to the story, and I say sort of because I feel like the only one, I don't know. There's not one character in this film that is like the main character that you follow throughout the film. There really is kind of three, but also kind of four. One of them has such little screen time that I can't. Part of me doesn't want to call him one of the main characters, even though technically he kind of is. But the characters are very good. Takashi Shimura as Dr. Yamane does a very, very, very solid job. I knew that too, yes. Takashi Shimura does a very good job as Dr. Yamane. And I'm not sure if this was one of those roles where he was like, where everybody saw him in public, they'd say, "Oh my God, it's Dr. Yamane." He certainly had many other roles in his repertoire of film that could certainly contribute to that, especially his role in Last Samurai, Seven Samurai. But Takashi, excuse me, hang on. Sorry, I just ate before I did this. Yeah, he does a really solid job. He comes off, admittedly, in my opinion, sometimes he comes off as being a bit of a like a bitchy brat, saying, "Oh, my discovery of the century is being destroyed. I want to study it. I want to be the first one to study it." Despite clearly ignoring the fact that, yeah, this is a wild animal that gives no fucks about human life and will destroy and will kill at the drop of a hat if it wants to, which of course it very much so wants to. So I kind of feel like at times I can't really like Dr. Yamane because I think he's kind of stupid in some cases, but he still is a well-written character and he still is um I wouldn't necessarily. Okay, toward the end of the movie, I would definitely call him the voice of reason. Yes, but there are many moments throughout the film where I just kind of think he's a bratty bitch. Um, but moving on. Akihiko Hirata as Dr. Serizawa is really, really, really solid. I do definitely give an actor a lot of credit if they don't have a lot of dialogue, yet they say a lot with just their facial expressions. And Akihiko Hirata certainly does that. Um, there's a lot of moments, especially. Yes, I know of the in the original script, Yamane was a very different character, and I actually kind of wish they went with that approach. Actually, there's a lot of things that I wish they did in the original script, but that's an entirely different story. Um, anyway, I feel like Akihiko Hirata sort of knew what he. Well, no, it's a little hard to explain Dr. Serizawa my thoughts on Dr. Serizawa in this movie because, like I said, I give a lot of respect to an actor who can say a lot with his facial expressions. There's many moments in the movie, well, not really many because he doesn't have that much screen time in the film, but there's a lot of times where you see Dr. Serizawa and he he says a lot with just his face. Where he'll be sitting, especially after Godzilla's rampage, when he sees Tokyo on fire on the TV. You see the look on his face, and it's a look of utter forlorn, just disdain and discomfort, or not really discomfort, but just what's the word? Distraught. That there it is. Um, the utter look of distraughtness on his face just goes to show that, oh my god, what the fuck am I doing just sitting here on my ass? Yes, I knew that too. Justin, you're telling me a lot of things that I already do know. I also know that too. Um but the reason why I feel like I have sort of mixed feelings towards Dr. Serizawa is kind of the same reason why I don't like John Galt in Atlas Shrugged, is that he's a main character who is introduced um, very, very late into the story, and he doesn't really have that much screen time. But I think John Galt has a little more screen time, quote unquote, because it's a book, not a movie. No, not really, Justin Tang. There really isn't. There's a lot of things I do know about the production of Gojira. But I feel like if they had at least another 5 minutes of screen time for Dr. Serizawa, I feel like he would be an even more complex character. But as it currently stands, I feel whenever I think about Dr. Serizawa, I just kind of feel like I've heard the phrase "less is more," and I just really don't think it applies here. I want a little more Dr. Serizawa screen time in order for me to truly like him. I do like him, don't get me wrong, but what we have is so little, I just kind of think it's a bit wasted, in my opinion. But what we have is still good, don't get me wrong. Probably the best scene with Dr. Serizawa in the film is after he clocks Ogata. He, quickly realizes what he had done. He helps Ogata to his feet and puts him in a chair, and he tears. He doesn't really help, but he just collects himself and begins to speak to Ogata in a very civilized manner, saying, "Look, I get what you're trying to do. I really, really do. But I am scared shitless here." That is his best scene in the entire movie, in my opinion. From right after he clocks Ogata up to right before the song Prayer for Peace is played, that is his best scene in the whole film. Many would probably agree with me that that is his best scene, but I truly do believe that is his best scene in the film. But enough about him. Let's move on. The rest of the characters, I'm not really going to get into the side characters. There's really only two more that I want to talk about. Akira Takarada as Ogata, kind of like with, or no, not really. Kind of like, because you do. Ogata has a fair amount of screen time in the film, uh, and he's a decent enough character. I mean, I suppose he is kind of likable, though. I feel like he really doesn't do all that much in terms of the plot, except I kind of wish Bride of Godzilla had been made, because that's actually kind of an interesting idea. But anyway, Ogata I have mixed feelings towards too. He doesn't. I feel like he doesn't really do much in terms of the plot, except basically to just be moral support for Emiko. It also doesn't help that I kind of feel like Akira Takarada, his acting isn't quite there. Though I do give him a little bit of slack because this was very, very, very early into his career, so he hadn't truly like figured out the way that he does act, especially in kaiju films, because this was so early in his career. But I just kind of feel like his performance is very prototypical, as this movie is itself, but his performance is very, very, very prototypical. Um, yeah, and a lot of people would say that about Dr. Series. I just kind of have mixed feelings towards Ogata, but he is a decent enough character. The only scene that I don't particularly care for with Ogata is the scene where he comes barging into Dr. Yamane's house, basically just acting like he already owns the joint. If I was Dr. Yamane, I would pretty much do the same thing. Say, get the fuck out of my house, kid. You're gonna barge into here, tell me what's what, tell me how to think, tell me when to shit, tell me how high to jump, then hit on my daughter when she's engaged. Fuck you. Get the fuck out of my house. That's the only scene for Ogata that I really don't particularly care for, to be perfectly honest. And then, of course, there's Momoko Kochi as Emiko. I'm going to receive some flack from this, and I really don't care. I don't... Hang on, guys. Hello? So there? Shit. God damn it. Reception in this house sucks. Sorry about that, Jacksonites. Oop, my... I guess you have to deal with this angle from now, unless it'll let me flip it upside down. Nah, I don't think that'll... Oh, yep, there we go. Okay. My apologies. Whoa! Shit. Fucker. Okay. Sorry about that, Jacksonites. I had to work out a business matter for tomorrow. But anyway, um, where was I? Oh shit! Fuck! I can't remember. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, I'm gonna receive some flack for my thoughts on Momoko Kochi as Emiko. I really don't care for her. For me, in my opinion, she's the weakest character in the film. Because I really just don't think her acting is that good in this film. I feel like it's very wooden, it's very bland, and it's very two-dimensional. Every scene that she's in, she has this look on her face that she and when she's speaking, she has the same look on her face. And it's just for me, it's really distracting and it sticks out like a sore thumb. I really don't like Momoko Kochi's acting in this film. And just in general, I'm not the biggest fan of her character. To me, all that she is a whimper whiner. She talks in a very whimpery voice, or no, whiny voice. Talks a very whiny voice and a very whimpery voice and a very just like everything in her life is just it's miserable. Like she's always worried that everything in her life is going to fall apart at the snap of a finger or gust of wind. It's honestly, to me, it's pathetic. I really don't care for Momoko Kochi's character. I'm not saying that for anybody out there who may say, "Oh, you just don't like women." No, that's not why I'm saying it. I'm saying it because I legitimately do believe that she is the weakest character in the film. I don't think her acting is good. And unlike Akira Takarada and Akihiko Hirata, who had maybe a year and a half of film experience behind them, still it's better than nothing. I feel like Momoko Kochi, she had nothing. Her acting is very, very, very poor in this film, in my opinion. And it doesn't really get any better. I don't like her acting in The Mysterians. And I don't like her acting in Godzilla vs. Destroyer. I don't like that film in general, but I just really do think she's the weakest character in the film. Pro number 2 is the acting. Aside from Momoko Kochi, the rest of the main characters at least, the rest of the main characters, they give very solid performances. As stated, both Akira Takarada had a year of film experience, film acting experience behind him, which is better than nothing. And Akihiko Hirata had maybe a year and a half of acting experience. Though I definitely think the best acting does come from Akihiko Hirata, with Takashi Shimura a very, very close second, in my opinion. But the best stuff comes from Akihiko Hirata. And overall, the acting is really solid, again, except for Momoko Kochi. I just don't... She's not good in this movie, in my opinion. Pro number 3 is the film's pacing. It's very, very, very cinematic. Not one scene drags. I feel like a lot of it is unintentional world building at times, which is the best type of world building, where they're not solely focused on world building. Admittedly, from what I've heard, a lot of Batman versus Superman, a lot of that film's runtime is dedicated solely to world building. Whereas you take another example to kind of be Godzilla related, another Warner Brothers franchise is the MonsterVerse, where that film does a lot of unintentional world building in the process of making its film and exploring its films. Specifically in Kong Skull Island, there is some world building in Godzilla 2014, but I definitely do feel like it's kind of minor, but still significant nonetheless. It is the introduction of Monarch, so that's at least something. But the pacing for the original Gojira is very, very, very solid. Not one scene drags. Every scene feels important to the plot. The monster rampage scenes, they're very well executed, at least pacing wise. They don't feel too long or too short. It's not like Gorgo, where there's times where it's fun, but there's also a lot of moments where it's just dull. Um, None of that bullshit here. There's a lot of really fun, um, or not really fun, but there's a lot of really solid pacing executions here in Gojira, both in its monster scenes and in its human scenes. Pro number, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. The ending to the movie I feel is very, very, very great. And actually, I think it's one of the greatest endings in all of kaiju movies in existence, because it's very powerful. It has a very good message. Even though I feel like it's a slightly heavy-handed nowadays, because it's basically stop nuclear war, stop nuclear weapons, and all that kind of stuff. But that's just a product of its time, because there are so many. There were so many 50s monster movies coming out at this time. Well, obviously because it was the 50s, but every studio was pumping out monster movies faster than you can snap your fingers. And a very, very, very common theme in all these monster movies was the anti-nuclear energy message. Stop atomic bombings, stop atomic testing, and all that kind of stuff. Because you never know what it may lead to. It may lead to a giant 50-meter tall atomic fire-breathing lizard, just like this movie. But the ending is very somber. It's very emotional. It's very just kind of a depressing ending. But if this is possible, depressing in a good way. Again, if that makes any sense. Overall, the ending is very, very, very well executed, in my opinion. There was a scene behind in the original script that would have had Ogata and Emiko fly over the area of Tokyo Bay where Serizawa died and drop a bouquet of flowers. I'm kind of glad that was cut out, because I just kind of feel like, okay, at this point, you're kind of overplaying it a little bit, because I feel like that would have been too much. But the ending currently, as it stands, I feel is very, very solid. Better. Pro number 5. Pro number 5 is the special effects. They're amazing, especially for their time. I'll get to the real nit and gritty stuff when I get to the cons. This movie does have a couple cons, but that's neither here nor there. The special effects are absolutely amazing. Especially for their time, especially for this being a first time crew. If you buy, let's see, if you buy this version of Gojira, at least I don't know if these special features are on the Criterion Blu-ray. I may actually purchase that to see if they are there, but if they're not, on this version of Gojira, there's a couple documentaries in the special features presented by Ed Godziszewski, one of which being the original storyboard and script of Gojira. But my favorite is the creation of the special effects and the creation of the Godzilla suit documentary. It's a fantastic little documentary. It goes into great detail about how the suit was made, exactly what they had to go through in order to create the suit. Because, like I said, the special effects crew they were new to this type of stuff, because this was the first type of film that was made in Japan at the time. Originally, Eiji Tsuburaya wanted to use stop motion because he was a huge fan of the original King Kong. He wanted to use stop motion to do the special effects, but he stated that if I had to use stop motion, it would take me 7 years to make this movie, versus the 7 to 8 months that the crew actually had to make this movie. That's a theme in a lot of Showa era, not just Showa era, but just Godzilla movies in general, is that they always were kind of made on rushed schedules, which is kind of a shame. It's not like nowadays where movies have to have at least 1 to 2 years to be made. Even nowadays, I still think it's a little rushed. But yeah, that's a different story. The special effects still are very, very, very solid. The miniature sets for Tokyo are very well constructed. They look almost real. They look very detailed. Um, there was a couple moments that Asia Samurai did use stop motion, yes. When Godzilla was caught in another bout of electrical wires and he was flinging his tail all about, and then he swung on top of the Michigeki Theater. But even then, it was a really, really, really quick shot. It's one of only two instances in Godzilla history that I can remember seeing stop motion. The other being in King Kong versus Godzilla. Ugh. But anyway, um, the miniature sets are well made. The Godzilla suit itself, I can't remember the name of this Godzilla suit. I'm gonna look it up. No, that's not it. Hang on, guys. Give me just a minute. Hang on. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble here. The Shodai Goji suit. That's what it's called. Every Godzilla suit has its own specific name, and the name of the Godzilla suit used in this movie is referred to as the Shodai Goji suit. Um, the Shodai Goji suit. This is the only suit used for the only film, obviously. It's popular with fans who prefer the first in a lot of the darker toned Godzilla films, which features a heavy, really heavy lower body, small arms, yes, one of which is a little skinnier than the other, a large round head that has pronounced brows, and while the pupils are completely round, of course, and they're really tiny, which is a feature that is very unique to this costume. Shodai Goji had a really big influence on the design for Shin Gojira. It's actually very obvious if you compare Shodai Goji to Shin Goji. It's I mean, they're almost night and they're kind of are almost night and day, but the similarities are quite are quite frequent. For a lot of close-up shots of Godzilla, though, there is a handheld puppet that was used, and the Shodai Goji suit is actually the second Godzilla suit made. The first one, which was the prototype suit, could not be used in full for much of the movie because the material that they used to create the suit were the materials there were very, very new. They're very prototypical, and they did not know how to apply them aesthetically to the suit, and they ended up making the suit almost unusable. The rubber material specifically that they used to make the skin for the suit, when it hardened, it literally did harden. It cured hard as a rock. So Haruo Nakajima, the suit actor for Gojira, may he rest in peace. Hiro Nakajima had such a hard time moving the suit. It was the suit itself was 2 meters in height, and it weighed about 220 pounds. It was incredibly hot inside the suit too, combined with little studio fires, um, or studio fires, with little fires throughout the set and extremely hot studio lights. Temperatures inside the suit easily reached about 130 degrees Fahrenheit, and Hiro Nakajima ended up passing out quite often on set, unfortunately. And the feet were so clumsy that he would literally trip over his own toes while walking. Minimal movement and minimal mouth and eye movements for the suit were executed with just simple wires. And Hiro Nakajima could barely move in anything else but a straight line. And the prototype suit was not absolutely wasted. They ended up cutting the suit in half, taking off the top, and just using Godzilla's legs for all the close-up shots of Godzilla's feet. And Hiro Nakajima could wear these with giant suspenders, and it was much more comfortable for him to execute movement in. But the second suit, the Shodai Goji suit, the main one, it still had a lot of problems that the prototype suit had, but they were able to fix it enough to the point where it was usable. But Hiro Nakajima still had such a hard time getting in and out of that suit. It was really rough on the inside, and because of how much he sweated inside the suit, more than a cup of sweat would be poured out of the suit itself. He ended up getting hellish muscle cramps and numerous abrasions and sores all over his body. It was hell inside that suit. It was also hard to breathe and hard to see. Several holes will be drilled. God damn it. Several holes will be drilled into Godzilla's neck, because that's where Hiro Nakajima's head was. Godzilla's shoulders were around here. Then up goes his neck, and Godzilla's head was on top of Hiro Nakajima's head right here, so he could see out of Godzilla's neck, essentially. And if you look carefully on a lot of later Godzilla suits, specifically in the Showa era, you can kind of see the eye holes that were drilled in, if you look hard enough. The minimal optical effects for Godzilla's dorsal plates glowing, those look good. They especially look good in black and white. The cinematography is very, 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 very solid, making Godzilla look like he's actually 50 meters in height. The special effects, just overall, they're very, 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 very solid. Especially for their time, and for the most part, they do hold up pretty well to this day. And the last pro that I want to talk about is the music score by Akira Ifukube. This is one of my favorite Akira Ifukube scores of all time. And that's your opinion, Justin. But the music score by Akira Ifukube, this is one of my absolute favorite Ifukube scores. I think it's one of his top 10 greatest music scores of all time. I think Akira Ifukube did firmly believe that this was his greatest score. I could certainly understand why he would think that. I'm not sure if this is his greatest, and it's not my absolute favorite Akira Ifukube score, but it is one of them. It's a very, very, very solid score. It's very balanced in terms of tone. Yeah, Godzilla Under the Sea is one of my favorites too. But my favorite score in the entire film is the music that plays during the scene when Godzilla is slowly approaching the electrified towers. That piece of music, it's very haunting and foreboding, and it fills you with dread. And that's one of the score's biggest pluses is in the film, is that tone-wise it's very balanced. There's a few moments where it's uplifting and it's upbeat and makes you feel optimistic and it makes you feel good. But then there's a lot of moments where the music really helps to put the punches into the scenes where they're just supposed to make you, yeah, Shidegawa, Godzilla Lands, thank you. where the scenes are just supposed to make you feel like utter shit. Like during Godzilla's big rampage in Tokyo, the music that plays there just makes you feel fucked, royally and so horrendously fucked. And it's really fun, or not really fun, but it's really good stuff to listen to. And also the music that plays during the hospital scenes is very somber, it's very depressing, and it just makes you feel like shit, complete and utter shit. Devastate, yeah, I think that's the name of it, Devastated Tokyo. It's kind of a hard thing. It's kind of a hard piece of music to listen to, but I think that is the point. The music score to this movie is freaking spectacular. Akira Ifukube truly is the greatest music composer for Godzilla in existence. Masaru Sato certainly does come close in some aspects, but in also in many other ways, Masaru Sato doesn't even come close to Akira Ifukube. So with all the pros out of the way, let's get into the cons. There's technically I have one written down, but I do have one nitpick, or no, technically two nitpicks. The one of them I already did address, and that's Momoko Kochi's character. I just don't care for. So let's count that as con number one. Con number two, this is the second nitpick. I feel like Dr. Serizawa's death could have been avoided. He could just I'm not gonna say that. I just feel like his death, in my opinion, could have been avoided. No, not really. The main title of Gojira does not remind me of the T-Rex from Jurassic Park. I can see where you're coming from, but no, it doesn't remind me of that. But I do feel like Dr. Sarah's death could have been avoided, and I feel like a little bit more screen time would have been much more, would have helped out Serizawa's character in his scenes a lot more, and also would have allowed Akihiko Hirata to flex his acting muscles a little more. Though again, what we still have here is still good. I feel like I want a little more. But the main con that I have written down here is that there are some aspects of the special effects that don't hold up. Namely, the fact that if you look, you can see a lot of the strings. Specifically with the jet planes. The jet planes, there's a lot of moments. Yeah, maybe Serizawa survived and worked for the Red Bamboo in Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. I'll address that when I finally get around to reviewing Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. But yeah. If you look at the jet planes in Gojira, there's many shots where you can clearly see the strings. I mean, it's almost Dai levels of incompetency when it comes to the jet planes in this movie. Though granted, this movie is very prototypical and they're still working out the kinks, this movie's production was a lot of, to quote Ed Godziszewski, a lot of trial and mostly error. So it is understandable, but it is still something to take note of. And the other aspect of special effects concerning the wires that doesn't hold up is there's a lot of shots where you can see the strings on Godzilla's tail. Yeah, the F-86Fs, they look decent, but it's just the wires that totally kill them. But there's one famous scene during Godzilla's rampage in Tokyo where he's walking past an office building and there's his tail swinging about. You can clearly see the wire that's holding the tail. So that does kind of stick out. And I wonder if the Criterion Blu-ray digitally removes those. If they did, that would certainly help the film. But there are some aspects of the special effects that don't hold up, and I can't help but overlook them. It's not a serious, huge detriment to the film itself. Do not take it like I'm saying that it is. I'm just saying it is something that should be taken note of. So with all that said about the original Gojira, as I said in my Godzilla promo video, I will be rating this film on two different levels, objectively and personally. Yes, that is true. There's one more thing I want to say about the puppet that they use for Godzilla's face, the hand puppet. It's very dirt face. There's a couple famous images of Godzilla looking straight at the camera, with his eyes wide open using the hand puppet. One eye is straight on, and then it looks like he has a lazy eye that's looking down here. And that's a little distracting. I also kind of feel like the face is a little disproportionate, kind of like it's a Muppet. One side of his face looks even, but then it looks like he has Stallone droop face on the other. So that looks a little strange. But there's another aspect. So I will be rating this movie on two different scales. Objectively, I will give this movie a perfect 10. It's the greatest monster movie of all time. It's one of the greatest Godzilla movies ever made. Obviously, it's got to be in the top 10. It's got a great score, good characters for the most part, great monster action, a great monster to go with it. Over a great premise overall. It's a very, very good movie. Yeah, that's true too. The puppets in Three-Headed Monster look like, in my opinion, they look like utter garbage. But anyway, it's a great start to a fantastic series that I certainly do love and adore, as do many other people, more than they care to admit, in my opinion. But a 10 out of 10 on an objective level, this movie certainly does get. However, personally, I'm going to stick with my 7 out of 10 rating. I give it a 7 out of 10, mainly because, for me, this movie is not really, it's not all that rewatchable. As I said at the beginning, I had to be in a certain mood to rewatch Gojira. I don't like Momoko Kochi. I just don't think she was a good actress. There's a couple scenes I don't care for Ogata in it. But overall, like I said, it's a great start to a great franchise. I do highly recommend the film, especially if you're a Godzilla. If you're a Godzilla fan and to this day you still have not seen the original Gojira, are you living under a fucking rock? But still, yeah, 7 out of 10. No, even the 64 puppets look like shit too. The 62 ones look bad as well. Oh my god, 62 puppets look horrendous. But yes. 7 out of 10 personally, a perfect 10 objectively. This is a great film. Greatest monster movie ever made. One of the greatest Godzilla movies ever made. Check it out. Great film. Great film. So, push the comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Share this video with your friends. Thank you to Justin Tang for sticking around for most of this stream. Thank you to Omega Picture for sticking around for practically the entire length of it. Look forward to tomorrow as I delve into one of my favorite movies of all time, and I begin one of my favorite franchises of all time with the original Tremors from 1990 starring Kevin Bacon. And of course, go get bombarded with atomic radiation and mutate into a fire-breathing giant dinosaur. And I will see you in the next one.